As a judge at the Fairview District Civil Court in Texas, I, Laura Bennett, never imagined I'd one day walk into my garage and find my beloved black Chevrolet Silverado gone. Nor did I expect that Catherine Holloway, the new president of the Pinewood Hills Homeowners Association (HOA), was running a criminal ring selling residents' vehicles through her brother-in-law's shady dealership. But what happens when this power-hungry woman realizes she's crossed the wrong judge, one who never backs down from injustice? Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. I drove a rental car from Dallas Airport back home on the evening of March 26, 2024, after a 2-day judicial conference in the city. My mind was tired, but my heart was eager to return to my 2-story house in Pinewood Hills, where I'd lived for the past 10 years. The blazing red sunset stretched across the neighborhood's perfectly manicured lawns, where every bush and fence had to meet Catherine Holloway's strict standards. I'd heard neighbors complain about her since she took over 3 months ago, but I never thought I'd become a target. As I turned onto the short road leading to my house, I pressed the remote to open the garage door, expecting the headlights to reflect off the glossy paint of my Silverado, the truck I'd saved 5 years to buy, my pride after 20 years as a judge. But as the garage door slowly lifted, a chill ran down my spine. The garage was empty. My Chevrolet Silverado, the one I always parked in this enclosed space to shield it from Texas weather and keep it safe, was gone. I turned off the rental car, stepped out, my high heels clicking on the concrete. My hands trembled as I scanned the garage. The tool rack was still there, the recycling bin untouched, but the large space where my truck usually sat now felt like an invisible void. No signs of a break-in, no broken glass, just an eerie silence. I hurried into the house through the garage door, my heart pounding. And then I saw it, a glaring orange notice taped crookedly to the door leading to the living room. I yanked it down, reading the bold text, HOA violation notice, commercial vehicle, not permitted in garage. At the bottom was the sloppy signature I'd seen on countless other neighborhood violation notices, Catherine Holloway, HOA president. I frowned, trying to make sense of the accusation. Commercial vehicle. My Silverado was personal, never used for business, and it was parked in my enclosed garage, not on the street or front yard. This was private space. No one, not even the HOA, had the right to intrude. I looked at the notice again, checking the date. It was issued 2 days ago, while I was still in Dallas. Catherine had acted when I was away, without any prior warning. I gripped the paper so hard it crumpled in my hand, anger surging through me. As a judge, I'd handled hundreds of property rights cases, and I knew how fiercely the law protected personal ownership. But this wasn't just a legal issue, it was personal. The Silverado wasn't just a truck, it was a reward I'd given myself after years of relentless work. From growing up poor in East Texas to sitting on the bench, I'd dreamed of a truck like that since I was a kid, and now it was gone because of some absurd rule I'd never heard of. I stepped into the living room, dropped my purse on the hardwood floor, and sank onto the couch. Through the large window, I watched Pinewood Hills fade into dusk. This neighborhood used to be peaceful, where neighbors waved over fences and held summer barbecues. But since Catherine Holloway took over, everything changed. She'd arrived 3 months ago, after the former president, Henry Brooks, abruptly resigned for reasons no one understood. With her perfectly curled blonde hair and icy stare, Catherine quickly imposed bizarre rules, measuring grass height with a ruler, fining people for mismatched flower pots, and now seizing vehicles from private garages. I'd thought the neighbors' complaints were exaggerated, but now I understood, she was a real threat. I stood there in the dim light of the living room, Catherine Holloway's orange notice still crumpled in my hand like a taunting challenge. My Chevrolet Silverado, the pride I'd saved 5 years to own, had vanished from my secure garage, and all I had was a ridiculous paper claiming it was a commercial vehicle. I knew how fiercely personal property rights were protected, but the anger burning in me now wasn't just about the law. It was the violation, the insult, right in the place I called home. I stepped back into the garage to inspect it more closely. My heels echoed on the concrete, each step like a drumbeat pushing me to act. I scanned the space. The tool rack sat neatly on the left, the recycling bin stood silently on the right, but the empty spot where my Silverado belonged showed nothing but faint streaks, maybe toe marks. No oil stains, no scratches, nothing to suggest my truck violated anything. I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm as I would on the bench, but this time it wasn't easy. This wasn't a courtroom case, this was my life. A rapid knock at the door broke my thoughts. I turned, hurried through the living room, and opened the front door. Helen Ortiz, my 70-year-old neighbor from next door, stood there in dirt-streaked gardening clothes, her face etched with worry. Helen was a kind widow who'd lived in Pinewood Hills longer than I had. She often brought over homemade cookies and shared stories about her late husband, a former teacher who'd passed 5 years ago. But now her eyes glistened with tears, and her voice trembled as she said, "Laura, I saw it all. I tried to stop them, but Catherine, she threatened me. Stop who? What happened to my truck, Helen? I grabbed her arm, pulling her inside to shield her from Catherine's prying eyes across the street. Helen sank onto the couch, clutching her chest as if to steady her breath. The night before last, around 3 a.m., she began. I heard strange noises outside. I looked out my window and saw a big tow truck parked in front of your house. Catherine was there, in her pajamas but dripping with jewelry, directing the driver to hook up your truck. I ran out, yelling that it had been parked in your garage for years, perfectly legal. But she turned to me, her eyes like ice, and said if I didn't shut up I'd be fined for interfering with HOA business. My blood surged, but I kept my voice steady, as if questioning a witness in court. They took my truck at 3 a.m. No prior notice, no valid reason. Helen nodded, her hands shaking. I snapped a few photos with my phone, but the light was bad. They're blurry. Catherine stood there laughing. Laura, she laughed like it was her own little game. I wanted to call you right away, but you were in Dallas, and I was afraid she'd turn on me next. I sat across from Helen, placing the notice on the table between us. She claims it's a violation because it's a commercial vehicle. But it's my personal truck, Helen. I park it in my enclosed garage, not on the street. Have you ever heard of a rule like that from the HOA? Helen shook her head firmly. Never. Henry Brooks was president for 15 years, and nothing like this ever happened. Catherine's been here a few months, and turned this place into her personal kingdom. She fined me last week, because my porch flower pot was too tall. I glanced out the window, seeing light spill from Catherine's house through her curtains. Helen was right. Pinewood Hills had been peaceful under Henry Brooks, but now it felt like a petty dictator's domain. I stood patting Helen's shoulder. Thanks for telling me, Helen. I'll figure out what's going on. Don't worry, I won't let her bully us. Helen gave a weak smile, but her eyes stayed anxious as she left. I returned to the garage, my mind racing. Catherine Holloway hadn't just taken my truck, she'd done it in the dead of night, while I was away, like a sneaking thief. But I wasn't one to give up. I'd start with the security cameras. If Helen was right, the footage would give me answers. After Helen Ortiz left, I stood in the living room, the glow from the table lamp illuminating the orange notice still on the couch. Helen's story about the tow truck at 3 a.m. and Catherine Holloway's laugh echoed in my mind, a wordless question demanding an answer. As a judge, I knew without evidence it was all speculation, and I wasn't about to let Catherine slip away with a few threats. I pulled out my phone, opening the security camera app I'd installed around the house years ago, a precaution after handling a revenge-related case. If she dared take my Chevrolet Silverado from my garage, there'd be proof. I sat at the dining table, propping my phone on a small stand my daughter Sophie had made in craft class. The app loaded, and I selected footage from 2 nights ago, March 24, when the notice was dated. I fast-forwarded through the quiet hours of Pinewood Hills, moonlight glowing on the empty street, a few stray cats prowling the front yard. Then, at 2:17 a.m., everything shifted. A large tow truck, lights off, crept silently up to my house. My heart raced as Catherine Holloway emerged from the shadows, wearing an expensive silk pajama set, a pearl necklace glinting faintly. She didn't look sneaky, on the contrary, she directed the tow driver with eager gestures, like a director filming her favorite action scene. I zoomed in, my hands trembling as I saw Catherine raise her phone to snap a selfie beside my Silverado as it was hooked up. Her smile, arrogant, triumphant, made my blood boil. She wasn't just taking my truck, she was reveling in it. I slowed the footage, noting every detail, the driver in a black jacket nodding to her orders, my garage door somehow opened, possibly the emergency code the HOA held. But what chilled me was the next scene. A sleek black BMW pulled up curbside, and a man stepped out. In the camera's night vision, I recognized the angular face and pricey suit. It was Robert Holloway, Catherine's brother-in-law, owner of Holloway Motors, a used car dealership on Fairview's outskirts. They stood together, pointing at my Silverado and laughing loudly. I couldn't hear their words, but from lip reading, a skill I'd picked up questioning witnesses, I caught sell and money repeated. Robert clapped Catherine's shoulder, then pulled a paper from his coat pocket and handed it to her. She nodded, stuffing it into her pajama pocket like it was routine. The tow truck rolled away, taking my truck, and Robert drove off in his BMW. Catherine lingered, glancing around to ensure no one saw, then strutted back to her house, her heels clicking on the sidewalk. I rewound the footage, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles whitened. This wasn't a random HOA seizure, this was a calculated scheme, and Catherine wasn't just the enforcer, she was the mastermind. Robert Holloway, with his shady dealership, was clearly her accomplice. As a judge, I'd seen plenty of scams in court, property theft, money laundering through shell companies. But this time, it was happening in my neighborhood, targeting me. What unnerved me wasn't their boldness, but their confidence. They thought no one would fight back. I paced the dining room, my mind spinning. Pinewood Hills had been peaceful under Henry Brooks, but Catherine had turned it into her playground in less than 3 months. I recalled Helen's words. She laughed like it was a game. But this wasn't a game, it was a crime. I looked out the window, seeing light spill from Catherine's second-floor curtains. She might be watching me now, binoculars in hand, thinking I'd let it slide like the others. She didn't know I'd just been appointed to oversee civil property cases in the district last week, a detail I hadn't shared with anyone in Pinewood Hills. I sat back at the table, opened my laptop, and started logging details from the footage, timestamps, the tow truck's license plate, Catherine and Robert's actions. The Silverado wasn't just my truck, it was evidence. This wasn't just about getting it back, it was about exposing the dark truth she hid behind that smug smile. At my dining table, laptop open, I was still reeling from the security footage. Images of Catherine Holloway directing the tow truck to take my Chevrolet Silverado at 2:17 a.m., her arrogant grin, and Robert Holloway emerging like a phantom in the night swirled in my head. This wasn't a simple HOA violation, it was organized crime, and I was at its center. But before I could jot down more details, my phone buzzed with a new text. I glanced at the screen. Jack Carter, my neighbor from across the street. Laura, check your cameras. You need to see what really happened. The message read simply. I frowned. Jack was a quiet man, about 40, often seen on his porch with a laptop or camera. I didn't know much about him beyond that he'd moved to Pinewood Hills a year ago, and rarely attended HOA meetings. But if he was texting me now, he had a reason. I replied quickly. Just watched my footage. What else do you know, Jack? Seconds later he texted back. I'm coming over. There's something you need to see in person. I stood, opened the front door, and saw Jack crossing the street with hurried steps, clutching his phone tightly. He wore a worn denim jacket, his eyes flashing with tension but also resolve. Laura, he whispered as he stepped inside, glancing over his shoulder like someone might be watching. I caught it on my home camera. You're not the only one they've targeted. I ushered him in, shut the door, and led him to the dining table, where my laptop still displayed my footage. What do you mean? I asked, my voice low but sharp. Jack set his phone on the table, pulling up a video he'd recorded from his house's vantage point. The footage started at 2:15 a.m. on March 24th. Just minutes before my camera kicked in, I saw the tow truck silently park in front of my house. Then Catherine appear, directing the driver with the enthusiasm I'd witnessed. But Jack's angles showed more. Robert Holloway stepping out of his BMW, conferring with Catherine, even inspecting my truck's paperwork before it was hauled off. I heard them mention something about a dealership and quick cash, Jack said, his voice low. I didn't catch it on audio, but I know they're up to something dirty. I nodded, my suspicion now a certainty. Thanks, Jack. My footage shows them laughing and talking about selling it too. This isn't a random seizure. Jack met my eyes, his narrowing. No, Laura, I'm an investigative reporter for the Fairview Gazette. I've been tracking Catherine since she forced Henry Brooks to resign 3 months ago. She's not just an overzealous HOA president. She's turning Pinewood Hills into her personal goldmine. I stood pacing the dining room to process it. You mean she's deliberately targeting residents' vehicles to sell through Robert's dealership? Jack nodded, opening a note file on his phone. I don't have enough for a public story yet, but I suspect she and Robert have done this elsewhere before coming here. Henry quit under pressure from Catherine. I overheard him tell a neighbor she threatened to sue him over a minor HOA bookkeeping error. I returned to the table, picking up the orange notice. She claims my truck's a commercial vehicle because of a court sticker on the windshield. But I checked. HOA rules don't ban personal vehicles in private garages. Jack smirked. Exactly. She doesn't need real rules. She makes them up. Check your front door, Laura. I bet she's slipped more of these through. I strode to the front door, bent down to the hardwood floor, and sure enough found 5 more violation notices stuffed through the slot while I was in Dallas. I scooped them up, skimming them. Unauthorized specialty vehicle storage, displaying unapproved government insignia, negatively impacting neighborhood aesthetics, all so absurd I nearly laughed. The last one read, immediate removal authorized, a clause I'd never seen in Pinewood Hills HOA rules in my 10 years here. She thinks I'll ignore this pile of nonsense. I muttered, handing them to Jack. He scanned them, nodding. This is her MO, intimidating residents with fake paperwork so they won't fight back. But you're not just anyone, Laura. You're a judge. She didn't count on that. I met his gaze, resolve surging. I'm not just a judge, Jack. I was appointed to oversee civil property cases last week. If she wants to play this game, I'll show her what real law looks like. Jack grinned, the first sign of relief on his face. Good, because I've got more evidence. Video from the community pool yesterday. Catherine was bragging about taking people's cars. Want to see? I nodded, sitting beside him. Show me everything, Jack. We're taking her down step by step. Jack Carter sat beside me at the dining table, the glow from his laptop and phone lighting up his determined face. The footage from my security cameras and his had revealed the truth. Catherine Holloway didn't just take my Chevrolet Silverado from my garage at 2:17 a.m. She did it with her brother-in-law Robert Holloway's help, part of an organized scheme. The fake violation notices stuffed through my door were just the surface. I knew something bigger was brewing in Pinewood Hills. When Jack offered to show me video from the community pool, I nodded instantly. Show me everything, Jack. I want to know what she's done to this neighborhood. Jack opened another video file on his phone. This one shot yesterday afternoon, March 25 at Pinewood Hills community pool area. I recognized the scene instantly. White lounge chairs lined around the clear blue water, a few large umbrellas shading the sun, and the usual sound of kids laughing in summer. But in the video there was no joy. Catherine stood amid a small group I dubbed her cronies, a few HOA members who nodded at her every word. She wore a brand new Gucci dress, gesturing grandly like she was giving a speech, her shrill voice carrying through Jack's phone speaker. These people think they can park anything in their garages or yards, Catherine said, her tone dripping with disdain. But I'm cleaning up this neighborhood, one ugly vehicle at a time. Property values here need protecting. She laughed loudly, then held up a stack of papers, I guess tow company receipts. I took the Lopez family's truck because their charity hauler was an eyesore. Then Mrs. Ortiz's car, that rusted junk her grandson drove, looked like trash. I'm making Pinewood Hills great again, one tow at a time. I gripped the table's edge, anger surging. The Lopez family, Miguel Lopez, a veteran 2 houses down, used his truck to haul charity goods for the local church. And Helen Ortiz, who just told me about the tow truck, had her grandson visit in an old but legal car. Catherine wasn't just targeting me, she was going after anyone she deemed unworthy of her self-made standards. Jack glanced at me, his eyes darkening. There's more, Laura. Keep listening. The video rolled on. Catherine bragged further. Priya Patel's car got taken last week too. That beat-up delivery van was dragging down home values. I've got full authority to remove them. The HOA gave me that power. She waved her arms, her cronies clapping in approval. I clenched my jaw. Priya Patel was a single mom at the end of the street, delivering packages to support her 2 young kids. Her van was her family's lifeline, and Catherine called it beat up. I looked at Jack. Since when does she have that authority? Pinewood Hills HOA rules require 30 days notice and 3 warnings before a tow. I read them thoroughly when I moved here. Jack nodded, scooting his chair closer. Exactly. I checked the original HOA bylaws from the county office. No such clause exists. Catherine's rewriting rules, but never puts them to a public vote like required. She targets people like Miguel, Helen, and Priya, newcomers, seniors, or anyone who's questioned her at meetings. He pulled up another video. This one from a hidden angle behind the community clubhouse last week. Catherine met Robert Holloway in the shadows, both reviewing car photos on her phone. Robert nodded, wrote a check, and handed it to her. She pocketed it with a smug grin. This is the biggest proof I've got so far, Jack said, voice low. They're not just taking cars, they're selling them through Holloway Motors, Robert's dealership. I've been tailing them for weeks, but when your truck got taken, I knew we had to act. I stood pacing the dining room to sort my thoughts. As a judge, I'd seen similar scams, selling stolen property through middlemen, but this was happening right in front of me, with my own truck. Jack, I said, turning to him, we need to know where my truck is and who's behind this beyond Robert. Can you help me? Jack smiled, pulling a small notebook from his jacket pocket. I've already started, Laura. I'm not just your neighbor, I'm an investigative reporter. I'm gathering evidence on HOA fraud across the county. Catherine's just the tip of the iceberg. Before I could reply, my front door swung open. Priya Patel stood there, eyes red, clutching her phone. Laura, they just took my mom's car too. She needs it for dialysis. I don't know what to do. I glanced out the window, seeing Catherine strutting down the sidewalk in heels, clipboard in hand, like she was hunting her next prey. I turned to Jack and Priya. Enough. We're stopping her. Jack, can you dig up more evidence? Priya, tell me everything you know. Priya nodded, sitting on the couch as Jack flipped open his notebook. I looked outside again. Catherine had no idea she'd just awakened a storm. Priya Patel sat on my couch, her trembling hands clutching her phone, having just finished telling me about her mom's car, a beat-up Honda used for dialysis trips, taken by Catherine Holloway hours ago. Her voice choked, but her eyes burned with resolve as she looked at me. Jack Carter remained at the dining table, his small notebook open, scribbled with notes on Catherine's actions. The community pool video and the clubhouse meeting between her and Robert Holloway confirmed my suspicions. My Chevrolet Silverado's removal from my garage wasn't random, it was part of a larger scheme targeting people like Miguel Lopez, Helen Ortiz, Priya, and now her mom. I stood, pacing the living room to organize my thoughts. I knew the next step was financial evidence. Money trails always exposed the truth in fraud cases. Jack, I said, turning to him. You said Catherine's selling cars through Robert's Holloway Motors. Do you have records of the auctions? Jack nodded, opening my laptop, which I'd let him use after Priya arrived. I don't have official access yet, but I know where to look. Do you have anyone at the courthouse who can help? I thought instantly of Emily, my old friend at the county court archives. We'd met in law school, and she was my go-to for digging into public records. I grabbed my phone and called her. Despite it nearing 10 p.m., Emily picked up after 2 rings, her voice sleepy but cheerful. Laura, calling this late, it's gotta be big, huh? I gave a small laugh, but my tone was serious. Emily, I need your help. My truck got taken from my garage by the HOA, and I suspect the president's selling residents' cars through a shady dealership. Can you check vehicle auction records in Fairview? Emily paused for a second, then I heard her jump out of bed. Holy cow, Laura, you're the 4th person this week asking about HOA-related car auctions around there. Hang on. I heard keys clacking through the speaker, and minutes later, she emailed me a file. I opened my laptop, downloaded it, and felt a chill as I read. My Silverado, worth over $50,000, had been auctioned off for $10,000 to Holloway Motors just yesterday, March 25. Emily, what do you mean 4th persons? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. 3 others reported missing cars in Pinewood Hills over the last 2 months, Emily replied. I'm sending you more files all sold to Holloway Motors for peanuts. I opened the attachments and the victim list appeared. Helen Ortiz lost her late husband's old Corvette, a priceless keepsake. Miguel Lopez lost his charity truck while visiting his daughter in Houston, and Priya Patel lost her delivery van during a night shift. Each sold for a fraction of its value, all through Robert Holloway's dealership. I spread the records on the table, anger rising. Priya, your mom's car was taken today. It hasn't hit auction yet. We've still got a shot. Priya nodded, her eyes lighting with hope. Jack looked at me, adding I checked Catherine's personal accounts through a bank source, not official, but enough to see. She gets big deposits after each sale, through a shell company called Pinewood Consulting. He pointed to a notebook line. $15,000 the day Miguel's truck sold, $12,000 for Helen's. I turned to my laptop, pulling up last year's Pinewood Hills HOA bylaws I'd saved. Section 73 was clear. No vehicle may be towed without 30 days notice and 3 separate warnings. None of us got a single warning. Rule changes required a resident vote, never held under Catherine. I looked at Jack and Priya. This isn't just an HOA violation. It's criminal fraud. I need to contact the FBI. My phone buzzed, a courthouse text confirming my appointment as overseer of civil property cases, effective this week. I smirked. Perfect timing. Jack, got any FBI contacts? I asked. He nodded. Worked with an agent in Dallas on real estate fraud. They've been eyeing Robert Holloway for interstate car trafficking, but they need a formal complainant. You're a judge, Laura, and a victim. You're who they need. I nodded, resolve surging. All right, I'll call them tomorrow morning. But first, we need more evidence. Where they're keeping the cars, and who else is behind this beyond Robert. Priya stood, her voice firm. I'll help. My mom can't lose her car. I know where Catherine meets her cronies. I'll follow her. Jack patted her shoulder. Good. I'll track down Robert's lot. Laura, you handle the FBI. On the morning of March 27th, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom curtains, but my mind wasn't as peaceful as usual. Last night, after Priya Patel and Jack Carter left, I'd spent hours at my laptop, reviewing security camera footage and auction records Emily Nowen sent. My Chevrolet Silverado had been sold for peanuts through Holloway Motors, along with vehicles belonging to Helen Ortiz, Miguel Lopez, Priya, and now Priya's mom, all victims of Catherine Holloway and her brother-in-law, Robert. Jack's financial evidence, large deposits into Catherine's account, plus the FBI's confirmation they were tracking Robert, turned my suspicions into undeniable truth. This was a criminal ring, right in Pinewood Hills. I stepped into the living room, brewed a cup of coffee, and checked my phone. Priya texted at 6 a.m. Catherine's meeting her cronies at the clubhouse at 8. I'll follow. Jack messaged too. Found Robert's lot outside Fairview. Helen's car is being moved. Meet you at 10. I replied to both. Good. Meet at my place at 10. Bring all evidence. As a judge, I knew we needed enough proof, not just to expose Catherine, but to bring her to court. But first, I had to call the FBI. I contacted Special Agent Daniel Reese, someone Jack had worked with in Dallas. After a few minutes explaining, my truck taken from my garage, camera footage, auction records and Catherine's deposits. Reese agreed. We've been watching Holloway Motors for interstate car trafficking, but we need a formal case to act. You're a judge and a victim, Laura. You can pave the way. Send all the evidence, and I'll be in Fairview this afternoon. I promised to send it after meeting Jack and Priya. At 10 sharp, the doorbell rang. Jack walked in, holding a stack of photos from Robert's lot. Helen Ortiz's husband's Corvette, still bearing its veteran plates, being loaded onto a big rig. They're moving it to Oklahoma today, Jack said, setting the photos on the dining table. Shot these from a distance, but the plates are clear. Helen's car. Priya followed, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep, but her voice was firm. I saw Catherine this morning. She handed her cronies a new stack of violation notices, targeting every car parked in garages on this street. I heard her tell Robert on the phone, "Move the cars fast, that judge lady's asking around." I frowned, grabbing the directional microphone. Last year's gift from Sophie, off the bookshelf. What else did you hear? Priya nodded. She told Robert to keep the Patel lady's car hidden. Don't sell it yet. That's my mom's car. I switched on the mic, checking a recording from the outdoor camera I'd forgotten to play while Jack and Priya were here last night. Catherine's voice came through clearly. "James, we need to move the cars out of state fast. That judge lady's asking around. I don't want trouble." I turned to Jack. "James is Robert, right?" Jack nodded. "His real name, Robert's a nickname." The doorbell rang again. Helen Ortiz stepped in, clutching a stack of threatening letters from Catherine, her eyes red. "Laura, I was too scared to speak up," she whispered, handing them to me. The letters grew harsher, from fines for interference to liens on your house if you don't shut up. I hugged Helen, anger surging. "You're not alone, Helen. We'll stop her." I pointed to Jack's photos. "That's your husband's car. We'll get it back." Jack opened his laptop, showing us lot photos. Beyond Helen's car, Miguel Lopez's charity truck and Priya's delivery van sat there, prepped for transfer. I pinpointed this lot through a Fairview Gazette source. He said, "They hold cars here before selling across state lines." Priya took Helen's hand, voice steady. "We need a community meeting, show everyone this." I nodded. "Right. I'll call an emergency HOA meeting tonight at the community center." "Jack, can you get the press?" Jack grinned. "Already handled. Fairview Gazette will be there. I've got a wire ready if needed." Helen straightened, wiping tears. "I'll call Miguel and the others. We can't let Catherine keep going." I looked at them. A small but fierce group. A judge, a reporter, a single mom and a widow, all pushed to the brink by Catherine. "Good," I said. "I'll send the footage, photos and records to the FBI now. Tonight, we'll show Catherine she can't bully Pinewood Hills anymore." I opened my email, sending everything to Agent Reese: footage from my and Jack's cameras, lot photos, auction records from Emily, mic audio. As I hit send, my phone buzzed with a security camera alert. I opened the app. Catherine was walking down the street, slapping violation notices on every garaged car, but her face on screen showed worry. She glanced around, jumping at every sound. She knew someone was watching, but had no idea how much we had. I turned to the group. "She's scared. Tonight we end this." Priya gripped Helen's hand. Jack nodded, and I felt the strength of our unity. Catherine thought she could control us, but she didn't know she just angered an entire community, and a judge ready to use the law to take her down. I arrived at the Pinewood Hills Community Center at 6 p.m. on March 27th, arms full with my laptop and a thick stack of documents, heart racing but hands steady. This emergency HOA meeting was our chance. Me, Jack Carter, Helen Ortiz, Priya Patel, Miguel Lopez and the whole community, to confront Catherine Holloway. I'd sent all the evidence to FBI Special Agent Daniel Reese: security camera footage, photos of Robert Holloway's lot, auction records from Emily, and the directional mic audio. Priest promised to be there with his team tonight, but first I wanted Pinewood Hills residents to see the truth firsthand. I set my laptop on the front table, hooking it to the projector the center used for presentations. 20 minutes before the meeting, residents trickled in. Helen Ortiz sat in the front row, clutching Catherine's threatening letters, her eyes alight with resolve. Beside her was Miguel Lopez, his rugged face tight with anger over his stolen charity truck. Priya Patel sat behind, whispering to her mom, Anjali, who'd lost her dialysis car yesterday. The room filled fast. I'd never seen an HOA meeting this packed. At 7 p.m. sharp, Catherine Holloway strode in, 5 minutes late, as if flexing her power. She wore a blazing red Gucci dress, heels clicking on the hardwood, that smug smile plastered on her face. Robert Holloway slunk into a back corner, trying to blend in despite the Rolex glinting on his wrist. Catherine tapped her pen on the podium, voice shrill. "Let's make this quick. Some of us have dinner plans." I stood slowly, letting my judge's badge swing visibly around my neck. "Actually, Catherine, this might take a while." I stepped forward, locking eyes with her. For those who don't know, I'm Laura Bennett, judge at the Fairview District Civil Court. Catherine's face paled, her smile freezing like it had been iced over. Robert shot up, his chair scraping loudly, but Jack Carter moved fast, blocking the exit. Today, I continued, we're watching some interesting footage. I clicked the remote, the projector flaring to life with security footage from my house at 2:17 a.m. on March 24th. Catherine directing the tow truck to take my Silverado from my garage played on screen, her laugh echoing as she snapped a selfie beside it. This was 2 days ago, I said, voice calm but sharp, time 2:17 a.m. Now let's see the HOA rules on towing. I clicked again, displaying Pinewood Hills Bylaw Section 72. All towing must occur in daylight, with 30 days prior notice. Murmurs rippled through the room. I pressed on, showing Jack's footage, Catherine and Robert laughing, swapping papers by his BMW. This isn't isolated, I said, switching to photos of Robert's lot. Helen's, Miguel's and Priya's vehicles sat there, ready to ship out of state. Catherine tried to recover, voice pitching high. These were legal tows. Those cars violated our standards, like Mrs. Ortiz for instance. I clicked, showing the auction receipt. Helen's husband's Corvette, worth $45,000, sold for $5,000 to Holloway Motors. Legal how, when your brother-in-law profits off our cars, Catherine. I turned to Robert, but he was gone. The back door clicked shut behind him. Residents stood, waving their own missing car papers and photos. You protect property values by selling our cars for scraps, Miguel shouted, holding up his truck's picture. Helen stood beside him, voice shaky but strong. My husband spent 20 years fixing that Corvette. We had every permit. Priya hugged her mom, adding, my mom needs her car to live. Catherine, you had no right. The room's noise swelled, Catherine slamming the podium, shrill. This is nonsense. I protect this neighborhood. You broke the rules. Which rules? I asked, voice steady as a blade. I projected a copy of the original HOA bylaws from the county office. Real rules require a resident vote for changes which you never held. You used a fake version you wrote yourself, Catherine. Residents yelled in fury, some filming on phones. Catherine grabbed her purse, shoving past Jack, but froze at hallway flashes. Fairview Gazette had arrived thanks to Jack. I stepped closer, voice low. Sit down, Catherine. We haven't covered the money flowing from your account through Holloway Motors yet. And the FBI out there wants to talk about interstate car transfers. Catherine's face went white, trembling hands dropping her purse to the floor. Jack stood, flashing his press badge. I'm not just a neighbor, I'm a Fairview Gazette reporter. I've tracked this HOA car theft ring across 3 states. And Catherine's the hub. He projected images. Residents sold cars. A map of tows targeting poor and elderly areas. Fake tax receipts from Pinewood Consulting. Helen sobbed seeing her husband's car on screen, now in Nevada for triple the price. The room went silent for a moment, then erupted. Residents surged, shouting at Catherine, demanding justice. I looked at her, that smug smile gone, replaced by raw fear. After the emergency HOA meeting at the Pinewood Hills Community Center ended, I stood amid a crowd of furious residents chanting for justice. The security footage, auction records, and financial evidence presented by me, Jack Carter, Helen Ortiz, Miguel Lopez, and Priya Patel, had completely shattered Catherine Holloway's facade. Her smug smile vanished, replaced by a pale face and shaking hands as she realized her empire was crumbling. Robert Holloway had fled mid-meeting, but I knew he wouldn't get far. FBI Special Agent Daniel Reese was waiting outside with his team. I left the center at 9 p.m., driving home with a mix of satisfaction and tension. Fairview Gazette had live-streamed the meeting's end, thanks to Jack's body wire. As I unlocked my door, the bell rang. Peering through the glass, I froze. Catherine stood there, still in her red Gucci dress, but hair disheveled, eyes wild with panic, no trace of confidence left. Laura, we need to talk, she said, voice trembling, clutching her pricey purse. I guessed cost someone's monthly salary here. I opened the door, keeping my tone calm as if questioning a defendant in court. Come in, Catherine. But I'll warn you, everything you say is being recorded. Jack had set up a legal recording device in my living room before the meeting, with my consent to preserve evidence. She stepped in, sinking onto the couch, heels clicking like a last grasp at pride. There's a huge misunderstanding here, she began, voice shifting wildly. The system glitched. I didn't know what Robert did with your car. I can compensate you, Laura. We can settle this privately. I sat across from her, arms crossed, silent for a moment to let her unravel. Then I grabbed a stack of documents from the dining table, photos of my Silverado, Helen's, Miguel's, Priya's and her mom's cars at Robert's lot, auction receipts from Emily, bank statements from Jack's source. I spread them before her. My truck was sold to a family in Oklahoma. a single-parent home with 3 kids, thinking they got a deal," I said, sliding the sale contract toward her. "Did you think of them when you planned this? Or Helen, losing her husband's keepsake? Or Angeli, losing her dialysis car?" Catherine paled, but still deflected. "Those people should thank me. I kept property values up. Don't you know old cars and garages drag down home prices?" She grabbed her phone, texting frantically. I glanced out the window. Fairview Gazette vans pulled up, flashes popping. Catherine didn't know Jack's report had aired county-wide, and residents were gathering outside. Her phone buzzed non-stop. I guessed her HOA cronies trying to disavow her. I stood as Helen and her grandson, Tim, crossed the street with press mics. "We just told Grandma's story on TV," Tim said, giving me a thumbs up. "That car had Grandpa's oxygen tank in the trunk." Catherine didn't care. Catherine shot up, her purse hitting the floor, credit cards from dozens of shell companies spilling out: Pinewood Consulting, Fairview Ventures, Holloway Holdings. She dropped to her knees to scoop them up, face white as paper. Red and blue lights flashed outside. Catherine looked up, eyes wide as 2 FBI agents, Daniel Reese and another, walked up my driveway. "I can fix this," she screamed, turning to me. "I'll find your truck, I swear." I opened the door for Reese, voice cold. "It's not about my truck anymore, Catherine. It's about every car you took, every family you hurt, and every law you broke, thinking you were above it all." Reese read Catherine her Miranda rights as she was cuffed, still shrieking about property values, while led to the squad car. Residents crowded the lawn, some crying, some hugging, Jack quietly filming. Tim gave another thumbs up as Helen hugged me. But I knew it wasn't over. My dining table still held evidence of similar cases across 3 states, and I wouldn't stop until they were all resolved. Weeks later, I stood in the Fairview District Courtroom, overseeing a class action suit against Catherine and Robert, who was caught the next day trying to flee to Oklahoma. Footage, documents, and testimony from Helen, Miguel, Priya, and dozens of other victims painted a clear picture. They'd made over $3 million from stolen cars through Robert's network, laundering it via shell companies. Catherine got 15 years, Robert 10, and both were ordered to compensate every victim. My Silverado was found in Oklahoma. I let that family keep it, because seeing Catherine face justice was worth more than any truck. I scanned the courtroom, Helen holding Miguel's hand, Priya hugging her mom, and knew this was the real victory. Not just prison time, but justice for those hurt. Months after Catherine and Robert Holloway's sentencing, I drove my new car, a compact Toyota Tacoma, home to Pinewood Hills under Texas's blazing red sunset. I no longer parked in the garage, not out of fear, but because I wanted to savor the freedom Catherine once tried to steal. Sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, I reflected on the journey from discovering my Chevrolet Silverado missing from my garage on the night of March 26th, to the emergency HOA meeting, and finally the day Catherine was cuffed in my living room. One lost truck had led me to dismantle an entire criminal ring, something even I, with 20 years as a judge, hadn't foreseen. Pinewood Hills was different now. After Catherine and Robert's convictions, 15 and 10 years in prison, plus millions in restitution, the community rose to reclaim our neighborhood. Helen Ortiz and Miguel Lopez were elected co-presidents of the new HOA in a public vote livelier than I'd ever seen. They rewrote the bylaws, scrapping Catherine's absurd rules, and installed security cameras throughout, not to monitor residents, but to protect us from people like her. Helen even proposed an HOA victim fund, using Catherine's restitution money, which I helped establish, expanding it across Texas. I pulled up to my house, stepped out, and looked around. Helen's lawn now bloomed with flowers, no longer measured by a ruler. Priya Patel drove by in her new delivery van, bought with restitution cash, waving as she passed. Miguel hosted weekend barbecues, and kids' laughter echoed again from the community pool. At monthly meetings we sometimes joked about Catherine, how she thought she could outsmart a judge, a reporter like Jack Carter, and a united community. But we never forgot the lesson: when people stand together, no bully can win. I walked inside, setting my keys on the dining table, once piled with evidence against Catherine. Jack was now a close friend, often stopping by with new investigative tales from Fairview Gazette. Priya and her mom, Anjali, brought Indian food to thank me. Helen gave me a tray of cookies weekly, calling me Pinewood Hills hero, a title I brushed off but quietly cherished. My Silverado now belonged to that Oklahoma family. I'd called them, told them to keep it, because the justice I'd won was worth more than any possession. Sitting on the couch I gazed out the window, moonlight glowing on the quiet street. Catherine was wrong to think she could control us. But her biggest mistake was missing the power of a united community. For me, this wasn't just a judge's victory, it was Pinewood Hills' triumph, where justice prevails when we stand as one. The story, HOA illicitly sold my truck for parking in my own garage, learns I'm a judge, reflects a striking reality in the U.S. Today, the overreach of some homeowners associations, HOAs, and the vital role of community unity in fighting injustice. In America, HOAs are often formed to maintain property values and living standards in neighborhoods, but it's not rare for them to exceed their authority, imposing absurd rules like Catherine Holloway did when she took Laura Bennett's truck from her private garage under the guise of it being a commercial vehicle. This mirrors real recent cases, like Texas residents fined for parking personal trucks in their driveways, or Florida homeowners losing property over minor infractions. Laura, a judge, using her legal expertise and security footage to expose Catherine, highlights the power of knowledge and technology in defending individual rights, a growing trend as Americans turn to doorbell cameras or local laws to push back. The story's lesson isn't just unity is strength, but specific action. Know your rights like Laura did by checking Pinewood Hills HOA bylaws, Section 73 requiring 30 days notice. Document evidence like Jack Carter with lot photos and recordings, and connect with your community, like Helen Ortiz, Miguel Lopez, and Priya Patel did at the HOA meeting. In real U.S. life today, ascended from below, this means reading your HOA contract before buying a home, attending community meetings to oversee leadership, and not hesitating to report abuses to authorities or the press. The story ends with Pinewood Hills rebuilding with a victim fund and security cameras, showing that when everyone pitches in, judge or single mom, injustice gets beaten back, and the community grows stronger than ever. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss dramatic tales of justice and community like this takedown of Catherine Holloway. Thanks for joining me in Pinewood Hills.